Hi, everybody. My name is Tara Lemeries. I'm really excited to be here with you on this recording to share with you 5 ways to deepen your practice. I have a presentation that I'd like to share with you, and then I'll take everything that I share with you into a practice. So you can watch this in 2 parts. You could just watch this presentation piece and then come and do the practice, or you could skip the presentation and go right to the practice, or maybe you'll do them in reverse. Anyway, I'm delighted you're here, and I hope you enjoy this information. This workshop is called 5 Ways to Deepen Your Practice. Again, my name is Tara Lemeries, and I'm excited to share with you some ideas for how you might grow your practice in a way that has not much to do with fancy poses. The very first way that I'd like you to consider as a way to deepen your yoga practice is for you to study the yoga texts. As you probably already know, modern Western yoga comes from this huge range of melded together sources. So, considering the important text and the teachings in their historical timeline can provide you with a context for the yoga practices you're doing today. To give you some idea of how the texts and the history of yoga line up in the timeline, I'd like to take you back for a little mini history lesson. So we're looking at between 1800 and 800 BCE, and this is the time of the Veda. The Vedas are this giant collection of manuscripts that outline for us the rituals of daily spiritual life. This word Veda, it literally translates to knowledge. And these texts are still revered and read and practiced and studied in Hinduism today. If we're trying to answer the question, what is yoga? And we're looking back into the Vedas, the Rig Veda, or the knowledge of the verses, doesn't use that word specifically, yoga, as a practice, but it does describe to us that yoga comes from the Sanskrit root word yuj, which means to yoke. Yoga is both the physical thing that joins the war horses together and the techniques that are used to calm those horses in order to get them to do their job. So if we're thinking about what does yoga mean for us today, can you see how this original use of the word yoga might apply to what you're doing on your yoga mat? Or how could you get it to apply to what you're doing on your yoga mat? If we shift a little farther forward into time, we find that we're with the Upanishads. This is about 900 to 300 BCE. That word Upanishad, it translates into English as sitting down near. In many ways, this set of manuscripts is a continuation of the Vedas, and here's where we really see the first specific definition of yoga. In fact, if we're looking at the answer, what is yoga, and we refer back to the Katha Upanishad, we get this definition. Yoga is complete stillness in which one enters the unitive state, never to become separate again. How does that apply to what's happening on your yoga mat? Still pushing a little farther forward into history, around 500 BCE, we get the absolutely beloved story of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, that word in Sanskrit, translates to the Song of God. Here's where we end up seeing an outline of the major paths of yoga. Not that yoga is just one thing, but that yoga has lots of different arms and spokes, lots of ways to participate in yoga in the world. And this text is often called the text of yoga activism. It's really interested in offering us ways to participate in yoga that does not require that we run away from our daily life. This is really a manual about how to participate in the requirements of modern life, of daily life, and still be a yoga practitioner. So, this text is giving us several definitions of what is yoga. It's the perfect evenness of the mind. Skill in action is one of the definitions that you'll see often quoted from the Bhagavad Gita. Yoga is also defined as integration of the spirit. Or this is my favorite one because it's really difficult, doing your job with detachment from the rewards. Finding the self through meditation is another of those definitions. And in fact, there's many more. It's an interesting inquiry to read through the Bhagavad Gita and to find sometimes maybe 10 definitions of what yoga is. So far, in this little quick overview of the historical texts of yoga, you may have noticed that there hasn't been a single mention of yoga asana. We don't actually get the mention of yoga asana or the postures of yoga until around 200 BCE in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Perhaps this is familiar to you. Many modern yoga practitioners have read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but this really isn't a book that describes much about asana. There's really only four sutras or four lines that really have anything to do with yoga. The majority of these sutras are about the inner workings of the mind. Here's where we see what Patanjali defines for us as an eight-limbed path of yoga, of which asana is one. We have to push forward even farther into the future to really start to get some descriptions of asana. It's interesting to think about how much of our current yoga practice is around the postures, but it's not really until about 1000 or 1500 CE in the Common Era that we really start to get instruction or texts that describe the physical methods of Hatha Yoga. We see these first in Goraksha's 100. And then the next three on this list, the Shiva Samhita, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and the Samhita, all become the first three main texts of Hatha Yoga. They're summarizing some of the ideas and theories and philosophies of the practice, but they also start to give us descriptions of the asanas, really specific ways to participate in mudra, hand gestures, of bandhas, the energetic locks in the body, and of mantras or sacred syllables or sounds that we can say to cultivate qualities through the practice. Many yoga practitioners have heard of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, but not many people have read or even know about the Shiva Samhita or the Garan Samhita. And these are two fascinating texts, great places to go when you want to go deeper in your yoga study and understanding. The next way that you can deepen your yoga practice is to practice pranayama. Perhaps some of you know pranayama practices as the kinds of practices that work with the breath. In this picture here, you can see that I'm using a hand gesture to participate in alternate nostril breathing, nadi shodhana in Sanskrit. This word pranayama, we can translate that when we look at the two pieces of the word. It's a contraction between this word prana, which means life force, and ayama, or an extension or an expansion. Essentially, this recommendation is for you to learn and to practice breathing techniques in order to move and grow and expand your life force. Just a reminder that our yoga practice isn't just about putting our bodies into shapes, but how we're really managing the energy that we have to bring to our daily life. I have a little bonus way for you to deepen your yoga practice here. And this is for you to learn Sanskrit. Or maybe not learn Sanskrit. I'll have to say, I'm definitely not a Sanskrit scholar, but I find this to be a really compelling study. Related to the previous recommendation about practicing pranayama, pranayama is often misread as a contraction between prana, we talked about that on the last slide, as life force, and yama, which is a restraint. Maybe you've heard of the yamas and the niyamas. They're outlined for us in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, among other texts. Basically, the kind of do's and don'ts, or the ways to observe yoga's ethical practices in the world. But that word yama means restraint. So if we read pranayama as life force restraint, we might approach our pranayama practice as a way to restrain or control the breath instead of thinking about pranayama as a practice of expansion or extension. So perhaps going to a Sanskrit dictionary or exploring Sanskrit and its meanings in the words of the yoga practice would offer you some valuable insight into yoga. The third way that I would invite you to deepen your yoga practice is meditation. To, in fact, explore different styles of meditation, to learn about the origins of those meditation practices and the benefits, And then as you're practicing to begin to compare those purported benefits to the experience that you're having in your meditation practice and in your wider life. Mindfulness meditation is a meditation practice that has really come to the forefront most recently. The foundation of mindfulness practice is a meditation practice that's known as shamatha. Shamatha is a Pali word that means calm abiding. This practice of shamatha, of mindfulness meditation, really comes from Buddhism. It's got really specific benefits too: presence, clarity, and stability. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I practice meditation so that I can be more peaceful." But actually, being more peaceful isn't one of the stated benefits of mindfulness meditation. Sometimes, when you practice shamatha, when you practice this mindfulness practice, you don't actually feel calm or peaceful at all. You might feel present and awake and aware to your circumstances. And that presence can bring you to a place of clarity and stability, of course, as stated by the benefits, and maybe even a sense of calm. But there are other days when you sit down for a mindfulness practice and you don't feel calm at all. So, understanding the benefits and the origins and the reasons for the meditations can help us to use the right meditation in the right moment as a tool for us to cultivate whatever qualities we need or want from the practice. The fourth way, and this is one of the ways that I really love to explore, is to look at the actions of the postures. So, not just the shapes themselves, but to really dive into the movement principles and the specific actions of the body. Doing that can make simple and familiar poses much more interesting and challenging, and it can help you start to prepare your body better to feel the benefits of a pose, to make the pose harder or more accessible as your mind and body and energy might require from your practice. I thought it'd be fun for me to show you how to think about, or just one way to think about, the actions of triangle pose. Look, there I am in triangle pose. Trikonasana is the Sanskrit for this posture. So take a second here just to look at the shape of this posture. And just consider, maybe you have a memory of being in triangle pose. Maybe you can sort of feel what that feels like in your body, even just looking at the picture of the pose. You'll see on this next slide that I'm giving you some idea about what's happening with your legs. So, you start with a wide position in your legs, but the action of your legs is really a kind of drawing in, a squeezing in towards the center line that creates this kind of pool of energy into your low belly. And that pool of energy is available for you to use in a particular way. Not only do you have this leg wide squeezing in thing, but there's also an external rotation in the front leg. So, if you're thinking about how to prepare your body to participate in a triangle pose, doing something that would give you practice rotating your leg externally could be a great way to prepare your body for the pose. At the same time that you're doing this external rotation in your legs and this squeeze in with your feet, your outer hip on the front leg is tugging backward. At the same time, the big toe mound of your front foot presses into the floor. As we move up the body in the pose, your rib cage would need to twist open in order to create this very lateral shape. So the bottom side of your ribs is twisting and moving open towards the ceiling. We can't forget about the upper body. In this exploration of triangle pose, your arms and your torso are really expanding away from the midline of the body. You have this big expansive shape across the top of your chest and a lengthening through the whole of your spine. All right, here's where we're at. Really, the end game of this whole 5 ways to deepen your practice is this. I would love for you to sign up for Lighthouse Yoga Center's Hatha Yoga teacher training. You would get an opportunity to study the texts, to learn the techniques, to explore pranayama and meditation and Sanskrit. I mean, more things that have even been included in this presentation. We go over the energy centers in the body. There's a segment on Ayurveda, the sister science that goes with yoga. And ultimately, this is a way for you to begin to translate what you love into classes that can support other people. On that note, I would love to offer you a practice that incorporates all of these 5 ways that I've just outlined. If you'd like to join me on the mat for the next bit of the practice, I will see you there.